We're ready. Thanks, Alicia.
Hello, folks. Hello to everyone as you're joining us this wonderful May evening. And if I can remind folks to mute your mics as you come on, please feel free to share your camera with us, your space, wherever you're joining us from. And in fact, if you would put into the chat where you're joining us from, where are you calling in from? I am sitting in Madison, Wisconsin. I am a volunteer for Environment for the Americas, and my name is Alicia King. So thanks so much for joining us this evening. And again, put in the chat where you're calling us from. Let us know where you're sitting today. And I want to also share with you all that we are recording this Bird Book Club tonight. So be aware that it is recorded. And then also, as we are talking this evening and chatting with our guest, I'm super excited to have Christian Cooper with us this evening. As we're discussing the book and talking about things, put your questions and your thoughts into the chat. And we'll have time to call on you. You can come on camera if you'd like to, or you can put your questions just in the chat, and I'm happy to ask them of Christian, as we move through the evening. And really, folks, it is okay if you have dogs and cats and people and kids, and you might even be outside birding while you're here on our Bird Book Club this evening. So don't be shy, don't be camera shy. Happy to see your smiling faces. All right, I think most everybody has settled in for the evening. So I am going to share just a little overview of Environment for the Americas. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully technology is my friend this evening and you'll be able to see my screen. How about that? Can somebody give me a wave or a...
That's good.
Good, great. Thanks, Daisy. And so we'll get to Christian in a minute, but hello to Daisy. Daisy is an Environment for the Americas staff member, and she's the brainchild behind all of the book stuff and make sure everything works. So thanks so much, Daisy. So let me just run through a few of these slides. Again, welcome to the Bird Book Club. My name is Alicia King. I am a volunteer with Environment for the Americas. My day job is working for the Forest Service, who is a major sponsor of Environment for the Americas, because we truly believe that the birds are so important in our world, and we want to support the work that Environment for the Americas does. My passion is birds, and so I love volunteering for Environment for the Americas. And let's see if I can make that slide advance. Why is it not moving forward? Okay. Technical difficulties. There we go. All right. I think we're on a roll now. So I just want to share our mission with you. So Environment for the Americas connects diverse people to birds and to nature. And we hope to inspire the next generation of conservationists by connecting all of these different people to nature and thinking about the protection of birds and their habitats. So it's really important for us to reach out to a wide audience to engage in bird watching. And this evening, we're going to hear a little bit from Christian and his thoughts about engaging people and getting people involved in birding. And so we do connect with people in a variety of ways. So we attend conferences and meetings globally so that we are connected with other people who are doing bird conservation work. We also do a lot of global data research and local surveys. So we work at the local level, regional level, national level, and globally to think about the data that we need to be able to do some of the conservation work that we do and to reach the people that we do, so that we can engage them in caring about birds and thinking about the ways that we can all in our daily lives help conserve birds. We create a lot of educational materials and do a lot of community outreach. materials that we create are created in several different languages. So Spanish is the most common language that we reproduce our materials in. Also French, and then other languages depending on who we're working with and where we're working. One of the really cool things that we do is through federal agencies and nonprofit partners, we create internship opportunities for young people to figure out, do I want a career in bird conservation? Do I want a career in environmental outreach to help people get more excited about the world around them? We pay them a stipend. We help with rent and with food and things, that just help them not have to worry about that as they're thinking about their potential career path. So one of the big things that Environment for the Americas works on is World Migratory Bird Day. How many of you have gone, let me see, a wave or a hand or a emoji action? How many of you have participated or gone to a World Migratory Bird Day event this year? I'm hoping that you all, if not, go to our website, check out where other festivals and fairs and things might be happening. But we create World Migratory Bird Day with the Convention on Migratory Species and with the Agreement on the Conservation of African Eurasian Migratory Water Birds. And so together we have a great strength in being able to bring forth the themes on an annual basis. This year it's insects and the important role that insects play in the lives of birds and therefore in our lives. So I hope that you get out to see something and participate. The education materials for this are on our website. Share them with your local schools or church group or club or library so that they know that they have access to these materials. And I, of course, have to mention that it's always fun going shopping. And so shopping on the environmentfortheamericas.org website will allow you not only to come away with cool bird nerdy stuff, but it allows you to support the organization. And so it is my go-to every time I think about Mother's Day, Father's Day, holidays, graduations, just all sorts of things. So I think I probably own like everything that this is showing here. So it's a good opportunity for you to support us and have a little fun shopping. And we do have a friend opportunity. You can be a friend of ours at varying levels with varying benefits. You can share with your friends, and we want you to stay in touch with us. So coming to our social media platforms, visiting our website, and then reach out and ask us questions. If you want to get engaged, if you want to do some volunteer work, if you want to find out where people in your neighborhood or close by are doing some things that you could potentially get involved in. So great opportunities for you to hang out with us related to birds and their conservation. And then the Bird Book Club, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I realize it's May. I realize this is an evening of fun stuff going on outside probably. Our next Bird Book Club is Thursday, June 27. We're going to talk about insects, the alien worlds of insects. So if you haven't already registered for that, please do so. It's a great opportunity to learn more about our annual theme this year. And then I am, again, super excited to have Christian Cooper hang out with us tonight. I was worried that we were dragging him away from May migration birding, but he's out east, so a little later there, probably the sun's getting ready to go down. So I want to share with you that Christian's story just really resonated with me. And I had been watching him since I heard him kind of emerge into this very public world of sharing his thoughts about his experiences. Christian is a science and comics writer and editor and the host and consulting producer of Extraordinary Birder on National Geographic. One of Marvel's first openly gay writer and editors. Cooper Christian introduced the first gay male character in Star Trek and mentions that in his book. The Starfleet Academy series, I think, was what it was, and it was nominated for a GLAAD Media Award. And I'm hoping Christian will tell us a little bit more about that, just because I think that helps set the stage for the things that Christian's been doing in his life. He also introduced the first openly lesbian character for Marvel and created and authored Queer Nation, the online gay comic. He's based in New York City. He's on the board of directors for the New York City Audubon. And I am so happy, Christian, to have you this evening. So welcome. And
Thanks for
I
having me.
turn it over to you.
Well, no, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm just happy to talk about the book and answer your questions. And I figured I'd start by reading a passage that kind of I've been sort of in the midst of spring migration. This is week 5, well into week 5 of getting up at 4 a.m. So this is past my bedtime. I'm a little groggy and tired, but there's good reason for that, which is what's going on in Central Park right now. So I figured I'd read a little piece of that chapter where I go in depth about Central Park. So why don't I start with that? I settle back into my own natural birding rhythm, albeit with a bit of urgency in my step, because there's a hooded warbler at stake. The Blackburnian warbler remains my big target of the day. But if I can get a hooded, I'll take it. It's not that I've never seen one before, not that I haven't seen one this season, but as far as the joy of collecting is concerned, my personal bias skews toward a big day list, racking up as many species in a single outing as possible. And a hooded would be an addition that isn't easy to come by. Sometimes my day list ends up focused. For example, if I happen to have luck with sparrows early on, I may go for a clean sweep of sparrow species that morning, determined to get that last one of our expected species before I leave the park. And if that sounds a bit obsessive, yes, listing can definitely lead down that path. Yet for most birders, the need to add another entry to one's list is tempered by something more fundamental. As I approach Strawberry Fields, I have the hooded warbler in mind, not just to see it, to list it, but simply to see it for itself. Because with a bird this striking, why wouldn't you want to see it as many times as possible? Even for birders obsessed with checking off another box, the first pleasure of birding, the beauty of the birds, still lurks at the heart of why we do this. I climb a hill to reach a long grassy expanse flanked by trees and plantings on both sides. Strawberry Fields, where to my knowledge you'll find no strawberries, but then I'm still at the start of my learning curve about plants. The name for this spot in Central Park is of recent vintage, taken from the Beatles song Strawberry Fields Forever, in tribute to the man who wrote it, John Lennon. Lennon's murder 9 years earlier is still fresh memory. Here in the shadow of the Dakota building where he lived and died, and here in liberal New York City, with the 8 years of the conservative President Reagan and now Bush, it seems an era died with him. But those gloomy thoughts can prevail against a promising morning. One of the best things about birding is how it pulls you out of your inner monologue and forces you to observe a larger world. That aspect helped save me as a closeted kid, and it sets to work now. There's a hooded warbler to find here, and all my concentration pours into scanning the lower branches and listening. Almost immediately, I hear the telltale explosive whistle and follow the sound to a fenced-in, shaded, shrubby patch. Anticipation mingles with urgency and a bit of fear that the bird will manage to slip by me. Not this time. He alights on a fallen log in full view, flicking his tail to show off the white in it as he forages. His yellow glows in the understory gloom, but it's the contrast of black on the yellow of his head that's so striking. I joke that with the hoodie pulled up over his head, if he were brown instead of yellow, here in New York City, he'd have been stopped and frisked by now. But the failings of law enforcement are the furthest thing from my mind. I'm too busy having my breath taken away. I am alone in the presence of this small, improbable creature to witness its remarkable show in silence, partly so as not to scare it away, partly out of reverence, and entirely overwhelmed with wonder. He flits a little farther away, then dives into the undergrowth and disappears. So I figured I'd start off with that just to give a sense of what it's like to bird Central Park early in the morning, since that's what I've been doing for a while now. And if my eyelids are droopy, that's why.
Thank you for that, Christian. I have birded in Central Park on multiple occasions, and it's a phenomenal place. So to hear you say, you get up that early in the morning, I'm afraid I didn't always get up that early in the morning when I was birding Central Park. But tell us your day today. Just what did you see today in Central Park?
Today was super slow. We've had, up until about 2 days ago, we'd had pretty much a steady stream of pretty good birds, like at least 15 warbler species each day. And, gradually shifting from the sort of arrive in the middle of migration warblers to more and more of the late arriving warblers and those species. But then about 2 days ago, our weather shifted. There were rains, and it's funny, when it cleared, we kind of figured, oh, there's going to be southwest winds. They're going to, act as a conveyor belt to send the birds our way. And it didn't happen. Either they kept going and they overshot us, or it emptied out what we had and didn't bring anything behind it yet. So I still feel like we have another push coming, because there are some species, or one species in particular, of warbler, that we haven't gotten yet. The morning warbler, which kind of is the last one to come. But the last 2 days definitely have been really slow, at least by our standards, and we're a little spoiled. But this morning I had blackpoll, magnolia, redstart, common yellowthroat. What am I forgetting in terms of the warblers? Northern water thrush. Wow. Is that all we got? And Canada warbler. But for us, that's a super slow day. And besides the lack of variety, there weren't very great numbers at all. But we did get one bird that was very exciting. I was birding with my pal on, as we call it, the dawn patrol. We get in early, both of us, and so we end up usually falling in together. And we were walking along. I was actually heading on. There's a bathroom that opens up early. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna hit the bathroom while we're going. And then as we're walking towards it, we hear a like loud as hell, like right in our ear. And we both just seized up, and I'm like, Acadian flycatcher, like right here. And sure enough, we found it and got a great look at it. And that's one of those end of the season birds that you don't always get. So it was nice to have it kind of present itself and kind of rub itself on our eyeballs to make it easy for us. So yeah, that was the bird of the day, I would say, for us. And we had peewees, and what else do we have today? Oh, I don't know. Cedar waxwings were everywhere.
Oh,
That was really kind of interesting. And Swainson's thrushes. So yeah, no, I mean, slow day, but still some birds.
oh my gosh. I'll take that kind of slow day. So I just want to make note of a comment. We have somebody from Alaska. Actually, that's where I just moved to Wisconsin from about a year and a half ago. And they had a guest speaker up at one of their festivals, the Kachemak Bay Shorebird Festival. Ted Floyd was up there, and he mentioned that New York City is one of his favorite birding spots. So I just wanted to share that one of our participants joining us from Alaska, midday there, right? It's like what, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. But the one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, and folks who are here regular, and I recognize a lot of folks know that I go through the book and I put little tabs on things that I'm particularly interested in calling attention to as I've read the book. But I wonder if you can share with us, you started thinking about birds at a very young age and considered yourself, really kind of a birder at a very, very young age. And as you were growing up, was that a continuous theme? Like, you just hung on to that all the steps of the way? Now, not everybody on our call tonight has read the book necessarily. So
Sure. No, yeah, it was definitely continuous. I kind of got hooked when I was about 9 or 10 years old, and it continued all through, junior high, high school. college, and then afterwards it was, it just kind of got into my blood, I guess is the way to say it. And it's funny because comics was a little bit different. I was one of my other passions, but I started reading comics when I was the same age, if not younger. And then it kind of fell away and I wasn't reading. And then, like, around junior year in high school, I picked up comics again. So there was this gap where I wasn't reading them. And I got hooked in comics again. And then, I ended up working at Marvel for a while. And then when I left Marvel, I was kind of went cold turkey. I'm like, all right, no more comics. I'm done with comics. So, and that kind of lasted. I'm still not steeped in comics the way I used to be, but I certainly go to every Marvel movie when it comes out. So, but the birds has lasted throughout. I should be a better birder than I am, considering how long I've been doing it. One of the great tragedies of my life is that I grew up on the South Shore of Long Island, so I used to have a fair degree of shorebird skills, and now that I've been, a city birder for so long, who doesn't drive and doesn't have a car, my shorebird skills have atrophied to like nobody's business. So, but I sort of console myself with, when I retire, I'm gonna take up the shorebird mantle again and get to a better place with shorebirds, because they're a challenge.
A great challenge. Christian, it's so nice to hear you actually say that, because I think about that also. When I lived in Florida and was a naturalist down there, I could tell you what the different goals were. Were they 1 year, 2 year? I could look at a Caspian tern flying, and I could say, oh, yep, that's exactly what that is. And now I look and I'm like, oh, is that a tern? It's not quite that bad, but it is. It's good to hear you say that it's something that you have to work at and practice. And somebody said on a recent in Wisconsin Ornithological Society had their big annual meeting just last weekend, and we're out birding, and I'm looking through the scope and trying to figure out oh, is that a royal tern? And I said, oh my gosh, I'm just out of practice. And this guy said, it's about practice. Practice might not actually make you perfect, as far as birding goes, but it's really fun to practice.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it should never be work. It's always about having fun. And and we all take our different approaches to birding. That keeps it fun for us, makes it fun for us. That's why we do it. So and the flip side of that is that yes, your skills can atrophy, but on the other hand, there's a certain base of knowledge that's always there, and it comes back really fast. Like every spring, I guess I'll hear my first Louisiana water thrush early in the migration, and there'll be that moments of hesitation and I'll be like, oh, am I hearing a Louisiana water thrush? And then the brain will say, yeah, you are. And then thereafter, from then on, I'll just pick it out instantly. But there's always that little bit of relearning that we can do, and it comes back. So that's nice to know.
That's great. So you start this book off now. Is this your? Well, let me back up. So you start your book off talking about the Central Park incident.
Sort of.
Yeah. So, and Daisy put a question in related to that. So were you thinking, this incident has really brought about awareness about some of the things going on related to the world of birding and the different people who may or may not be a part of the world of birding? Was that your thought? I mean, you've got so much in here, and you've got these great tips, and I want to make sure we go through some of those tips. And then you also have things that, that just made me think about birding in general. But what was your big, I'm going to write this book?
Well, okay. So first of all, I have to correct one thing, which is that you say I start with the incident in Central Park. So I said sort of, because it's a deliberate fake out. I start with an incident in Central Park, and you think, oh, it's that incident, and then you read it, and you're like, oh wait, what's going on here? And suddenly, as you read deeper into it, you realize, oh, he's running through the park not because some terrible thing has happened, but because there's a Kirtland's warbler, and that really is a far more important incident as far as I'm concerned. A Kirtland's warbler showing up in Central Park. I mean, our world bent. The total scope of reality bent when we found out that this had happened, and every birder worth their salt within like a 40-mile radius just dropped everything and raced for the park to see this thing. So I kind of start with that because it kind of sets the tone of the madness of birding in a good way. And then eventually, I do eventually get to that other incident in Central Park. But by the time I get to that, it's sort of in context at that point. And that was important to me because, I do have this whole life, and the book is a memoir. It's a person's life story. It is not a birding how-to. That said, it's shot through with birding, as you mentioned, the birding tips, the 7 pleasures of birding, which I came up with when I got sick and tired of my friends saying, why don't we see you at all during the month of May? This is ridiculous. And I'm like, all right, you want to know why you don't see me in the month of May? This is why. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's all of that is in the book. And because birding has been an important part of my life, that's throughout the book, but it is a memoir. So it was very important to me in telling the story of my life that I put in perspective that infamous incident, which was a little bit more than a minute. So I wanted people to understand there's all the stuff that happened before that kind of informs that moment, that sets it into context, and that puts it in a perspective of my life of, yeah, this was important when it happened, that it happened. It's had some important ramifications, but by no means is it, the defining moment for me. And in fact, what it has done for me is all the things I was doing before, it's kind of given me a chance to do it on a bigger scale. So that's sort of where I come from on that whole subject.
I love that. Yes. And I said the incident when it was an incident. And I love that, start right away. I was geared toward, oh, he's going to tell us about that incident. And then you were running.
I make your wait for that.
It was awesome. So I want to make sure I don't miss questions in here because we have a few. So, so Daisy had put in here, it's been 4 years since your Central Park accident this weekend, since it's, so do you think that the situation has changed in 4 years? Could that happen again? What are your feelings about that?
Sure. It could happen again. I'm sure it has happened again, just with less fanfare, for, whatever reason. Mine went viral, quote unquote, because there was video and because it happened on the same day as George Floyd. And that sort of stamped it indelibly into a little part of the nation's history, for better or for worse. And let's be clear what we're talking about. Let's not skirt the issue. It's about Black people feeling welcome in public spaces, in the outdoors, Black and brown people. And we can make it even larger. Women feeling comfortable in the outdoors, trans people, gay people feeling comfortable in public spaces. All of it all comes into play. But in particular, there's this long history of an undercurrent of bias aimed at Black people that has plagued our society for a long, long time. And one reason why what happened to me became so notorious was because it kind of crystallized that bias. In the morning when it happened to me, in terms of the bias we all have to deal with as Black people on a daily basis that encumbers our lives, that in some ways threatens our lives. And then in the afternoon, the bias that actually killed a Black man, that this white police officer thought it was okay for him to kneel on that man's neck for over 8 minutes until he was dead. And in the minds of the other police officers there, it was in their minds okay for them to stand around and do nothing. So those two incidents juxtaposed sparked a moment. Now, Has the moment made any lasting change? Incrementally, yes. But these are deep-seated problems in our culture. It's the fact that what happened to me happened in very liberal New York City with a person who considered herself a liberal individual who didn't use any racial slurs. She used the politically correct term African American, and yet that bias was still there for her to consciously or unconsciously tap into when she thought it would give her leverage in our confrontation. So, these things are not going to go away that easily. But hopefully more people are aware of it now, and being aware of it is the first step towards maybe making some lasting change. So could it happen again? Absolutely. Has it happened again? I'm sure it has. But it's up to all of us to do what we can, bit by bit, piece by piece, to make things a little bit better.
Thank you for that, Christian. My stepson is Black, and I'm surprised when we do go out bird watching, and people are surprised that he's watching birds, that he's got binoculars, and they'll say, "Oh, he's so good at it," or this kind of like surprise of, "Oh, he's a bird watcher." It never ceases to amaze me how you're right, that bias is the undercurrent of what people are thinking, and then they question who you are and what you are, and oh, your parents dragged you out to go bird watching. Nope, wanted to be there, wants to do it. He it's a passion, and the fact that people still kind of question that, or just they kind of like raise their eyebrows, I don't understand it, but
Well,
uh,
talking about those assumptions, I have always, since my earliest days birding in Central Park 40 years ago, um, has it been 40 years? Thinking, yeah, it's 40 years, or just about. From my earliest days birding in Central Park, I've been very aware that my crawling around in the shrubs in the early morning hours with a black metal object in my hands will be perceived completely differently than a white person doing exactly the same thing. But with me, that black metal object will be assumed to be a gun, and it will put me at risk. Whereas with a white person, and there are dozens of white people doing the same thing. They've been doing it all season, but the assumptions will be completely different with them. And so that is the reality that black birders live with. Very famously, J. Drew Lanham, who's kind of the very articulate soul of us black birders. He's written so many things that are just insightful and powerful, and very poetic. But he did this very humorous and yet kind of disturbing list of like rules for the black birder. And one of them, I forget which number it was, we'll call it number 6, was something like, absolutely under no circumstances go birding wearing a hoodie. So, just because the assumptions that come with that.
Yep, absolutely. So we have a question that I want to get to, but since you mentioned Drew, you have a really great quote from him in your book, and I just want to read it. "I believe the best way to begin reconnecting humanity's heart, mind, and soul to nature is for us to share our individual stories." And so I feel like that's what you're doing in this book. And Kiki from Granada says, "I really loved your book. It was a well-written memoir that kept my attention." And she asks, "Was it always your intention to write a book?" And then she has a second question in here. Well, she has a second comment, but was it always your intention to write a book? And then she wonders or she's saying that she hopes the Black Birders Week helps change some of the bias that you were just talking about.
Sure. And speaking of Black Birders Week, it's coming up. And I will be I'm very honored to be giving the keynote speech at the Black Excellence in Birding Black Tie Gala. in Philadelphia, which is, I didn't even know we had such a thing, and we do. And this is the third year, and it's one of those things like Black Birders Week that grew out of the incident in Central Park. It still astonishes me, some of the things that have been spawned out of that. But I'm just thrilled to be able to do that. And so Black Birders Week, yeah, I think raises awareness. I think a lot of us Black Birders were taken aback as we started connecting through Black Birders Week and other things, and we're like, oh wait, there's this many of us out there now? Wow, who knew? So it's kind of exciting. It's kind of fun. As far as whether I always wanted to write a memoir, absolutely not. Um, and what's really interesting is when someone suggested, oh, you should write a memoir, I was like, who the hell wants to read my memoir? And then I saw that Colin Jost, the comedian on Saturday Night Live who does Weekend Update, that he had written a memoir. And I'm like, he's 12 years old. If he can write a memoir, I can write a memoir. So at that point, I, sort of sat down. But again, it gave me an opportunity to do what I've been doing all along, before the incident, which was, I've always been sort of preaching the gospel of birding. I've been volunteering in the New York City public schools. In fact, I was in a public school this afternoon, getting the kids out and looking for birds. I've been doing that for probably not quite 40 years, probably more like 30 years. So that's always been my passion, is to sort of, hey, you know what, this is something that we can do, that you should be doing, and I don't care who you are. There are no excuses. You should be out there looking for birds, but particularly I love to get the Black kids interested, because we have been so underrepresented in the birding community for so long. So this book was a chance for me to try to do that, to talk about my own experience and hopefully get some people interested. Oh, you're muted.
That's because I was coughing. So thank you for that, Christian. And so one of the things that I like in your introduction is that you talk about, you say, allow me to pull back the curtain and welcome you to my world. And so do you mind talking a little bit about your world? You very openly talk about your being gay. And
there's no not open about that. Hasn't been for why do you keep making me catalog years? For many years, let's just say many.
Yeah, so you at one point, and I don't remember which one of my stickers it is in the book, but you talk about, and if I'm remembering this, something about it was better than being in the closet, or the birding allowed you to. Am I remembering that?
What birding does, and no matter what your concerns are, no matter what your woes are, for me, the predominant woe in my youth was, because I knew I was gay from about the age of 5. I just didn't necessarily immediately have the words for it, but I knew what was going on. And interestingly enough, I knew enough that somehow metabolized, my social context to know I should not talk about this. Because
you didn't even tell your parents about it. You didn't.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I was in very conservative Long Island growing up in the late 60s, early 70s. And, I just knew, even at a very young age, like the age of 5, that this is not something you talk about. You keep this locked away for the rest of your life, or so I thought at the time. And, when you're a kid, when you're a teenager or younger, but those years are all you know. So it really is an eternity. It feels like an eternity. But whatever your woes are, whether it's that or whether it's, I don't care, financial problems, whatever is preying on you, when you're birding, it has to slip away for a little while. There's no other option if you want to see birds. You've got to get outside of your own head. You've got to be listening for sounds. You've got to be looking for a certain type of motion amidst the trees that's separate from the falling of a random leaf. You've got to be engaged with the external world. And when you do that, it's incredibly healing, it's incredibly meditative, and for at least that little while, you can't be obsessing about whatever is bugging you at that moment. So it's a great that's a great thing. It's another yet another reason why I am adamant about getting more Black folk out there, because we got a lot of stuff dumped on us in this society, and for a lot of Black people, it would be very healing to get out there and look for birds. Besides the fact that there is no creature on the planet that better embodies freedom in its purest sense, the ability to fly, to go in any direction, anywhere across the globe. And for people whose history is bound up in having our freedom taken away, denied, curtailed, limited, absolutely that symbolism is so important and so uplifting. So that's why I just think it's so important. So getting out there birding was a way to get outside your own head and just for a little while at least be okay.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to ask you about your spark bird, but I also want to, if I'm remembering correctly, you had an opportunity to do some woodworking as a youngster, and you didn't make a stool, you made a bird feeder. What do you think if you hadn't, if you, what would have happened if you made the stool?
I'd be a podiatrist. There was a little bit of divine intervention going in there. Someone or something somewhere with some beneficent powers reached down and said, "Not the footstool, not the footstool. Build a bird feeder." And so that's what I built. And the course of history was changed thereafter. No, I mean, so I built the bird feeder, put it up in the backyard, filled it up with, I think, cracked corn initially. And lo and behold, speaking of the spark bird, this crow with a patch of red on the wings showed up. And I'm like, oh my God, I've discovered this new species of crow. I've done this incredible biological feat in my preteen years. And then I found out, oh, it's a red-winged blackbird. But that still remains one of my favorite birds is the red-winged blackbird, because they're awesome. But that was my spark bird. That got the ball rolling.
Yeah. I'd love to see a show of hands. How many of you have spark birds out there? Do you know what your spark bird is? Do you and sorry, your little emojis that you can use should be at the bottom of your screen under reactions. You should be able to like raise your hand and go, "Yes, I have a spark bird." You can even put it in the chat if you want to. My daughter's spark bird actually one of her favorite birds and one of the birds that when she was young, was the red-winged blackbird as well. So when I read that in your book, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's my daughter's spark bird. She loves it.
Well, and for me, growing up on Long Island, that for me was the sign of spring, not robins, because a lot of robins, will hang around all winter long. But when I heard that okaree, I ran to the window as a kid because I'm like, spring is here, spring is here.
Yeah, so we're getting lots of northern flicker, red-headed woodpecker.
Oh,
A
redheaded.
lesser Antillean tanager. There's Kiki from from not
Grenada.
the United States. Great blue heron, smoothbill Annie. Oh my gosh, we're getting some interesting spark birds in here.
Yeah.
Cardinals, and wrens, they're so loud. Goldfinches. So yeah, I think those birds are pretty important. And I will share I know this is all about you tonight, Christian, but I want to share a quick story about engaging youth in bird watching. We did a great backyard bird count when I was living in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I had I was the president of our Audubon Society at the time, and I was trying to get more kids engaged in birds and trying to find those children that did not have the opportunity to go birding the way so many of the suburban kids did. So I targeted some inner city schools that needed a bus. We needed to pay for a bus to get them out of the school to go bird watching or to go do something. And so we had a young group of kids that were able to have their parents sign the permission slips. We did the Great Backyard Bird Count with the governor and his wife on the governor property on Meridian Avenue in Indianapolis. And the spark bird for them, I mean, the whole group saw these wrens moving in and out of the property at this governor's residence, and they were just amazed. We, sat on the lawn with binoculars, we had bird books, we had cards, to help go through. And we later, years later, did some additional things on the governor's residence, certifying the habitat with National Wildlife Federation. And some of those same kids came back later and remembered the wrens that they had seen when they were
awesome.
there at that backyard. So, spot on what you're saying. It's amazing how it can make a huge difference.
Well, I'm all about grabbing them while they're young, get them started early, and, you have the chance not only to possibly make a lifelong birder, but very often when the kids show an interest in bird, the parents are like, what the heck is going on here? And then suddenly the parents are drawn in and they become birders. In fact, one of our board members of New York City Audubon, he became a board member not because he paid any interest in birds, but because his son did, and that got him drawn in. So, it has a sort of ripple effect that goes on there. So,
well, Christian, tell us a little bit about some of your pleasures, the pleasures.
7 pleasures.
Yep.
It's hard for me to do these off the top of my head because I always leave out one. But I'll see if I can get through them all. And again, this sprung out of the fact that, friends of mine, I got tired of their questioning why I was unavailable in May. And so I'm like, look, all right, why this birding thing? Number one, first and foremost, the beauty of the birds. Number two, the joy of being out in nature in a natural habitat. Let's see, 3, the joy of scientific discovery. For example, I was birding in the Hudson Valley and I saw this indigo bunting fly up, and he landed on a branch and he was beating his bill against the branch. And I'm like, oh, wow, is he trying to clean his bill? And then it dawned on me, no, I'm standing so close to his nest and he wants to be beating on my head, but I'm too big. So this is redirected aggression. And that was fascinating, that this is a phenomenon that you see with birds. So there's the joy of scientific discovery. 3. 4, the joy of puzzle solving. When you have a difficult idea. I remember when I was birding in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and there was a flycatcher there that was bedeviling me. I could not figure out what this flycatcher was, and I staked it out. It went away. I'm like, I don't care. I'm waiting for it to come back. And I must have spent an hour. And the sense of satisfaction when I finally nailed the ID was just joyous. So, there's that joy of problem solving. Number 5, the joy of collecting, because we all make lists. And, some people go crazy with the lists, and okay, that's fine. But we all make the lists, whether we go crazy with them or not. I have a list of birds seen, on my roof. So, you get to collect. God, in the spring here in New York, we're all about collecting the warblers. God forbid you get between an East Coast birder and that last morning warbler that he hasn't gotten yet, that he needs to complete his collection of warblers for the spring. So the joy of collecting. Number 6, the joy of hunting without the bloodshed. So, you're stalking the bird, you're trying to be quiet, especially with something like a mourning warbler who's a skulker in the underbrush. You are working hard to get this bird. And then hopefully you get that view and you're not blowing it away happily. You're just taking it in. But you get all the pleasures of that hunting phenomenon without the bloodshed. And then the last one, number 7, is the best one, I think, to anybody who's birding for a little while. It's the one that gives us the biggest thrill, which I call the unicorn effect, which is that when you've been birding for any length of time, you become aware of certain species. You see pictures of them, you see drawings of them in the book, and you're like, oh my God, that thing actually is real? It's amazing. I want to see that someday. And, for years, you're like, yeah, I really want to see that. That's amazing. And then one day you're out in the field and flap, 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 and it lands there in front of you. And it's as if some mythical creature, a unicorn, had stepped out of the forest and presented itself to you. And it's just such a huge thrill. So those are the seven pleasures. And I go into a little bit more detail about it in the book, but though that's the basic outline of what the seven pleasures are, as I see them anyway.
Yeah. I love that. As I was reading them, I'm like, oh, that is so clever. I really like that, the pleasure, because, I internalize that. Of course it's pleasurable. I love going bird watching. And I remember I went for a job interview once, and it was in Arizona. And the guy at the desk was sitting in front of a big window that was looking out in a wooded area. And I was constantly doing this as I'm, looking behind him, like, oh, bird just went by. Oh, and I'm sure he just thought I was nuts. I confessed to him that I was looking for birds.
Well, there was a moment when we were shooting my TV show, Extraordinary Birder, in Washington, D.C., and the executive producer was like, all right, everybody kind of circle up. We've got to have our safety talk before we start filming today. And it was the first good day of the spring, the first day when you're actually getting a variety and volume of birds. And there was a guy there, Dan Roush, who's like a big birder down in Washington, D.C., and he and I are hearing all these birds pouring into our ear, and this guy thinks we're paying attention to him, and we're actually signing to each other. And I'm like, for hooded, like I'm hearing hooded, and we're gesturing and making all these signs because we're like, we don't care about the safety thing. We want to be chasing our birds. So,
oh, that's awesome. Now Dan gets paid to bird. I would love to have his job. He actually worked on the Urban Bird Treaty City program in Washington, D.C. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had the Urban Bird Treaty program, and he was incredibly a valuable resource and force behind that accreditation. And now Environment for the Americas does works on Bird City in collaboration with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. But yeah, Dan is awesome. Awesome. He's incredible.
Well, and Alicia, I want to mention one thing you talked about, and I meant to say this before when you talked about getting a bus to take kids from the inner city out to go birding, and that's fabulous. But also, I think it's important sometimes to recognize that we should bring birding to where they are, meet people where they live, and certainly, I mean, granted, we're not going to find the kind of birds necessarily that we all love to see, right in their housing projects or something like that. But there are birds there. There are robins. Yeah. There are pigeons. I have done a 180 on pigeons because I used to be one of the people I taught in the schools with. She was always telling me, "Oh yeah, we'll have the kids look at pigeons," and I'm like, "Those are barely birds, in my opinion." And I've done a complete 180 because you know what? The pigeons are our best ambassador. They're in all our cities. They are there for people to see. They are a gateway drug, for lack of a better term, into the world of birds. And yeah, sure, then eventually we can get them moving on to other things. But use what you've got, use what's there. And you'd be surprised just how much is there. And how little they know. Like the first time I took out some of the kids, we showed them a house sparrow. We figured, oh yeah, they know they're sparrows. And then they were like, oh, I always thought those were baby pigeons. And it just, it never occurred to me that that's how they would think of them. So yeah, and even in the biggest cities, in the middle of these cities, I live in a sea of concrete in Manhattan, and I have gone up to my roof and watched a red-tailed hawk sit across the street as a pair of kestrels tag teamed him like in a wrestling match. One would go at him and then wait, and then the other one would go at him and wait, and then suddenly they both stopped. And then I hear, cack, 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 and then Peregrine Falcon comes diving in and goes after the red tail. And the poor red tail is there going, and meanwhile, the kestrels are sitting on the sidelines going, well, we're not getting involved in this. Yeah, and so it's just this wonderful aerial dogfight. And nobody knew what was happening except for me. All these people walking around on the streets below, and they don't know what's going on above their heads. So yeah, lots of bird life, even in the inner city.
Yeah, no, you're so meet people where they are for sure. We have two quick questions because we're getting close to the end of our time. Um, Kiki is asking, is there any bird you haven't seen yet, Christian, that you are dying to see?
Oh my goodness, so many. Many, many, many. But one is the great gray owl. I've never seen one. Would love to see that bird. Also, the bee hummingbird down in Cuba, the smallest hummingbird there is. One of my great passions, besides growing up in the East, warblers, is hummingbirds. They are. I've been to Ecuador twice, and get on a plane right now and go if you can, because the hummingbirds down there will knock your socks off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So plenty that I still want to see.
Yeah, and that's the thing about there's so many birds. And so Environment for the Americas has had some trips to Cuba, and we partner with Optics for the Tropics for those. I went on one of the trips and yes, saw the bee hummingbird. So you'll have
Oh,
to
nice.
put that on your list. Um,
Awesome.
so one of the other questions that was in here had something about song. Do you have like a favorite bird song?
Yes. Okay. There's a couple answers to that. I am an ear birder, as they say. I really rely on my ears to find the birds. And one of those people, you could drop me in any woods in the Northeast and I could tell you exactly what's there just from what I hear, which is why I resent Merlin, because it makes me obsolete. But no, I don't really resent Merlin. It's an amazing tool. But one of my favorites is the winter wren. The way I describe it is as if some fairy jazz flutist in the middle of the fairy woods sort of went on a crazy solo riff on his little fairy flute. And the first time I ever heard it, I was like, "What the hell is that sound?" And I looked around and finally saw him skulk out, and I was like, "That is awesome." But probably the song that hits me with the greatest urgency is the Blackburnian warbler, because that's my favorite warbler. So I hear that, and it immediately seizes every inch of my attention because I want to go see the bird. And plus, just that last note of the song, which is so hard to hear because that song is so incredibly high, so incredibly thin, so incredibly fast, so high pitched. And that last note is so urgent. It sounds like the bird is being strangled. So, as a friend of mine puts it, he thinks of it as come and see me. And it's so urgent. So I hear that and it just grabs me right away.
I love it. So we are out of time. There was one question that if you just have an extra minute, and I know folks
Sure.
might have to be leaving, but how do you get better birding by ear? Any
Oh,
hint, tips?
no, absolutely. I always say forget the recordings. And I say that because it becomes kind of a mishmash in your head when you're just listening to recordings and trying to learn them. Learn them in the field. If you hear something you don't recognize, spend the time to track it down. And that'll do a couple of things. First of all, as you spend the 20 minutes trying to find the damn bird, and then the whole time it's pouring into your ear. So you're hearing it over and over and over. Do not stop until you see the bird and you see its mouth going and its tail bobbing, because you can get faked out. There may be another bird in the bush that's actually the one singing. So you gotta, but the other thing it does is that from then on, after you do that, forever that song is associated with a memory.
Yes.
And so it's no longer just a random, memorization of, oh, this song goes with this bird. You'll hear it and you'll flash back to that 20 minutes you spent, crawling around on your hands and knees trying to see this darn bird. And you'll be like, oh yeah, I remember when I did that. This is a chestnut-sided warbler. And
Excellent. I love that. I love that. So, for those of you who have not yet read the book, you can order it through Environment for the Americas. It won't be available until June. Nod your head, Daisy. Yes, June. Is that when the book will be available?
Yes,
You
the
can order
new
it now.
copy of the book will be available in June.
Yep, excellent. Christian, thank you so much for staying up so late. And we appreciate it very much. And we hope that you have great birding tomorrow morning, despite the fact that you might be a little tired because you spent so much time with us this evening.
Well, thanks for having me. And yeah, I hope we all get to see some great birds in the days to come.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we will see you next month on the Environment for the Americas Bird Book Club. Thanks so much and have a nice night.